what we can do as the Interparliamentary Union.
Hello and welcome. I'm Vaishali Kohli and you're watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. India and Israel have agreed to enter negotiations for a free trade agreement. India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal highlighted the country's unlimited potential for economic cooperation, while Israel's Economy Minister said the deal will make India a priority for Israeli businesses. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says the U.S. has guaranteed Israel's qualitative military edge after Trump proposed selling 5 F-35 jets to Saudi Arabia. U.S. Secretary Marco Rubio reassured Israel's advanced jets remain protected. The White House says it was unaware of a July meeting between U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee and Jonathan Pollard, who served 30 years in prison for spying for Israel. Pollard said he met Huckabee to thank him for efforts securing his release, a meeting that caught U.S. officials by surprise. The UN called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to Israeli troops in southern Syria concerning and urged Israel to honor the 1974 disengagement agreement. Damascus condemned the trip as a violation of sovereignty. The White House says a U.S.-backed peace plan promoted by President Donald Trump is good for both Russia and Ukraine, rejecting concerns it mirrors Moscow's demands. President Zelensky insists any deal must ensure a dignified peace as he meets senior U.S. Army officials in Kyiv. A Russian strike on Zaporizhia killed at least 5 people and injured 3 more. Governor Ivan Fedorov said guided bombs hit the city as emergency crews rescued civilians. Meanwhile, Putin visited a frontline command post amid unverified Russian claims of taking Kupiansk. President Maduro says Venezuela is ready to export gas to Colombia for the first time, as the two countries recently agreed on a binational economic zone to boost trade and energy, with final technical details still being worked out. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an order removing tariffs on Brazilian imports, including aircraft parts, beef, coffee, and orange juice. The move is welcomed by President Lula and aims to ease trade pressures, support supply chains, and boost economic ties between the U.S. and Brazil. India and Israel have signed the terms of reference for negotiations for a free trade agreement as the Indian Ministry of Commerce and Industry Piyush Goyal announced that the two countries have decided to enter into negotiations for FTA. He underlined that the two nations have unlimited possibilities and potential to expand economic engagement. Meanwhile, the Israeli Economy Minister said that India is one of the best friends Israel has around the world and that the free trade agreement will make India a priority for Israeli entrepreneurs. Let's in fact listen in to what the two leaders have said.
The bilateral investment treaty and the free trade agreement will open the doors to greater market access, flow of capital, investments and trade, both in goods and services, remove obstacles to doing business, provide clarity, predictability and stability to our economic engagement. We work together in the space of defense as much as we work together in agri-tech, fintech, education, space technologies, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. The sky is the limit to the potential between the two countries.
I think everyone in the world saw what we did to Iran. Okay? We've demonstrated that we have deep penetration, excellent intelligence, excellent weaponry for defense, and as important, the best defense is offense. And we only share these ideas with our best friends. And I could certainly tell you that India is one of the best friends Israel has around the world. That the free trade agreement that we're talking about will make India a priority for Israeli entrepreneurs. We call it sort of a hub to Asia. And so I think that's a classic win-win. Many of the companies I spoke to understand that big potential. And we have to make that ecosystem simple. The governments have to make it simple. That's part of the free trade agreement.
I have Peter Baum, editor, Weekly Blitz, joining me on the broadcast from London. Now, Peter, I want to begin by asking you, now, India and Israel have, of course, signed the terms of reference for negotiations for a free trade agreement. How do you see this?
What a wonderful story to end the week. A real good news story, and what a boost for Israel's supporters, and what a kick in the teeth for Israel's enemies. Now, we know that India and Israel have had very good relations for a number of years now. There is no doubt about it. On all my visits to Israel, I've seen many Indian people who are there not only for the tourism, but working in tech, in agriculture, in the health services and in education. And I'm sure India now will become a major tourist spot for all Israelis and for all supporters of Israel's globally. This, as both diplomats have said, is a win-win for both countries. As we know, Israel and India, for their weapons trade agreements, I think India was accountable between 2020 and 2024 for about 35% of all weaponry exported by Israel. This further enhances the trade agreements. It's a great news for both countries. The Indian market is absolutely huge. Israel's technology is amongst the best in the world, and India can thrive from this, as can Israel. So, and more importantly, geopolitically, it sends a message. It sends a message to all those Arab countries, all those Muslim countries who would rather see India harmed and indeed see Israel harmed, that these two democracies will thrive and grow together in all spheres, politically, technology, in agriculture, in water, irrigation, etc., etc. It really is a lovely story to end the week in, and everyone who believes in democracy globally can only be supportive of this tie-up.
Peter, you know, the free trade agreement also mentions that it'll make India a priority specifically for Israeli entrepreneurs. So would you like to shed some light on that?
Yeah, as we know, for various reasons, Israeli entrepreneurs have been responsible for floating and selling some of the most, currently the biggest tech companies globally, on the NASDAQ, etc., etc. Israel intelligence and Israeli technology and entrepreneurship are amongst the highest in the world. It would be hoped that those skill sets will be exported to India. I'm sure they will be exported to India, whereby Indian entrepreneurs, already some of the smartest in the world, will be further encouraged to educate, to develop, to create their own companies that will be floated on the worldwide markets at massive premiums. So I think the tie-up between the two, as the diplomat said, is a win-win situation. It will certainly help the Indian stock market going forward. It would certainly help investment in India from a startup point of view. So by every account, I can't see one negative, but only positives about this story. And as I said before, for all those who believe in democracies globally and who support India and who support Israel, this is really, really exceptional news. Great news. I can't overemphasize how important this is to both countries, and going forward, how profitable and exceptional it will be to both countries.
Peter, I'd request you to stay on with me. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he received guarantees from the United States that Israel's qualitative military edge in the region will remain intact. Netanyahu spoke after a phone call with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio following President Donald Trump's announcement of a potential sale of F-35 warplanes to Saudi Arabia. Netanyahu said Rubio reassured him that the U.S. remains committed to preserving Israel's military advantage, including its F-35 capabilities, which are legally guaranteed. Israel is currently the only Middle East country operating F-35 jets, regarded as the world's most advanced fighter aircraft. Meanwhile, the Israeli Air Force has opposed selling the jets to Saudi Arabia, warning it could affect Israel's regional air superiority, while Saudi Arabia's jets would be less advanced than Israel's customized F-351 Adir. The deal has sparked concern in Jerusalem. And I, of course, have my guest, Peter Baum, editor, Weekly Blitz, joining me from London. Now, Peter, how do you see this development?
Yes, it's a very strange one. Undoubtedly, the Israeli-Saudi relationship is complex. Historically, they've been enemies, let's face it. But because of the sheer expansionism and military expansionism via Iran, Israel considers Saudi to be my enemy's enemy. Through Trump, that relationship, that dynamic has changed. And Saudi did indeed allow Israel to use its airspace, and has done for a couple of years now, for various missions, certainly when attacking the Houthis in Yemen. So we've got past that stage of my enemy's enemy is my friend, and now both Israel and the Saudis recognize that together they can thwart the bigger threat to the region, which has been Iran and her proxies. Now, clearly, the hawks in the Israeli cabinet would rather that the Saudis were not able to obtain such sophisticated weaponry from Trump. But Trump is a businessman, and he will do what he can to export and to sell American goods to his friends. And he does consider Saudi Arabia to be a friend on the global stage. The hawks in the Israeli cabinet are very upset about this, about selling such sophisticated weaponry, but I think the more pragmatic cabinet members, and indeed Israeli society as a whole, recognize that they have to have friends in the Arab region, and Saudi Arabia, being a major Arab nation, can be part of that achievement. Naturally, they would like them to have signed up to the Abraham Accords, which they're reluctant to do so until the Palestinian state status is more controlled, let's say. It's given more help, given more assistance. But I think Israeli society as a whole, and I think Netanyahu has recognized this, as long as Israel has the technical edge on the weaponry, which Trump has assured the Israelis that it has, they will not be too despondent that they have an associate in the region that will stand up to any Iranian and Shia threat. And Saudi Arabia will now be able to do this. It will not be all up to Israel. So I think if we're looking upon it from a completely impartial point of view, it works for America, it works for Saudi, and it's more than on a scale of 100%, it's 65% works for Israel. So I think the hawks in the Israeli cabinet may put up a fight, they may sound off in the media, etc., etc. But I think Israel and the Israeli cabinet as a whole won't be too concerned about this agreement that the US has with Saudi.
Thank you, Peter, for joining me on the broadcast. And now, well, White House spokeswoman Karoline Leavitt says that the White House was unaware of a meeting between U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee and Jonathan Pollard, the former U.S. Navy analyst who spent 3 decades in prison for spying for Israel. According to media reports, Huckabee met Pollard in July at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. The meeting was kept off Huckabee's official schedule and caught U.S. officials by surprise. Meanwhile, Jonathan Pollard says that he sought the recently revealed meeting with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mark Huckabee, to thank the Trump envoy for its efforts to secure his release from prison. Pollard was convicted in 1987 and sentenced to life, the harshest punishment ever given for spying for an ally, for passing highly classified U.S. material to Israel. He served 30 years before being paroled in 2015 and moving to Israel in 2020. The case stressed U.S.-Israel relations, and many in the U.S. intelligence community still view his case as one of the most damaging breaches of classified information in U.S. history. While some in Israel regard him as a hero, let's listen in to what the White House spokesperson had to say.
The White House was not aware of that meeting, but the President stands by our Ambassador, Mike Huckabee, and all that he's doing for the United States and Israel.
And I now have my guest joining me on the broadcast, Dr. Punsara Amarasinghe, Middle East Affairs expert, Kotalavala Defense University, and he's joining me from Colombo. Now, I'd like to begin by asking you, how do you feel about the White House spokeswoman Karoline Leavitt saying that the White House, of course, was unaware of a meeting between U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee and Jonathan Pollard, the former U.S. Navy analyst?
In my opinion, this would not lead to a severe diplomatic halubalu between Washington and Jerusalem, because the media spokesperson from White House has clearly emphasized the fact that White House was not aware of this unexpected meeting. But then again, I need to tell you that this might kind of, revival of that one of the most, the diplomatic blunders, I would say that one of the most outrageous events in the 1980s, in the mid-1980s, which paved the path to deteriorate the relations between CIA and Mossad. As you clearly mentioned, Jonathan Pollard, his legacy has entered history as a convict and as a person who unveiled classified documents from United States to Israel, and he was working as one of the coveted agents for Israeli intelligence community. And as you clearly pointed out, that after serving in prison for nearly 20 years, he was released in year 2015. Now that affair has been ended for good, but still there is a kind of a stir going on in the intelligence community about these issues, especially in particular in the aftermath of the imprisonment of Jonathan Pollard. Most of the intelligence commentators from United States and the West have clearly questioned about the loyalty of the American Jews in Washington or elsewhere in North America. Like, they were questioning whether they are keeping their allegiance to the United States or Israel. So this is kind of a issue that comes back, that hits back from the past after this recent meeting between U.S. Ambassador and Jonathan Pollard in Jerusalem, which has been alerted by the CIA chief in Jerusalem as well. But in conclusion, in my conviction, this will not lead to a further or severe diplomatic halubalu between the two countries.
All right, I'd request you to stay on with me. Now, United Nations spokesperson Stephanie Dujarric has called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to Syria concerning. He's also urged Israel to agree to the 1974 disengagement agreement. Let's listen in.
Yeah, I mean, I think this very public visit is concerning, to say the least. We call on Israel to respect the disengagement, the 1974 disengagement agreement. As you'll recall, in the recently passed resolution 2799, the Security Council called for the full sovereignty, unity, and independence and territorial integrity of Syria. This is also an issue that was raised during the recent meeting between Najat Roshdi and the Foreign Minister of Syria.
Now, this comes as Netanyahu visited Israeli troops deployed in southern Syria, drawing strong condemnation from the government in Damascus, which denounced the trip as a violation of sovereignty. Israel expanded its military presence in southern Syria after the ousting of Bashar al-Assad last December, seizing positions east of a UN-patrolled buffer zone that separates the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights from Syrian territory. And I do have Dr. Punsara Amarasinghe, my guest, who's joining me from, of course, Colombo. Now, I want to begin by asking you, of course, now this is a big statement that has been made. How do you feel about it?
Well, ironically, this comes after the meeting between President Shara from Syria with President Trump at White House. At White House, there was a kind of a slight ray of hope that the Syria would do everything to renew ties with Israel. But this recent visit made by Benjamin Netanyahu seems to have shattered all these expectations. And we need to understand this whole trajectory based on the geopolitical escalation, in particular after the fall of Assad regime in 2024 December. If you can clearly recall, since December, Israelis have been intensifying their strikes in South Syria, in southern part of Syria, at unprecedented level. In particular, I think you clearly mentioned about the 1974 disengagement agreement and the UN Security Council resolution. And in terms of those resolution and the agreement, and this seems to be a blatant violation of Syria's own sovereignty. But my question is, has it been concerned by Tel Aviv? Because for past 12 months, for past several months, especially since the fall of Assad's regime in Syria, you can clearly see that Israelis have made a significant incursion into Syrian mainland by occupying a significant position from the Golan Heights. So if this continues, in my opinion, the renewing the ties between two countries, between Damascus and Jerusalem, seems to be highly unlikely.
All right. I'd also like your comments on Israel expanding its military presence in southern Syria after the ousting of Bashar al-Assad last December.
Right. Yeah, I think from Israeli point of view, and they have depicted this as a kind of a temporary defensive position. This is what IDF spokesperson has come up with. Because you know that in Syria, there is a considerable number of Druze, the Druze population. And when Israelis fastened their intensifying military attacks in Syria, they came up with a defense indicating that they need to protect the Druze community stuck in Syrian civil war. And also, Assad regime was kind of a great stalemate or an obstacle for Israelis for more than several decades. But after the fall of Assad's regime, I think Tel Aviv, the Israelis, have considerably leveraged their strategic position towards Syria, in particular in terms of occupying the whole Golan Heights. Right, and which seems to be something really, really crucial in terms of Israeli strategic perspectives.
All right. I appreciate your joining me on the broadcast. Thank you for joining us on NewsX World. And now moving on. Now, European Union Commissioner for the Mediterranean, Dubravka Sueka says that more international support is needed to stabilize the Palestinian fiscal situation, adding that the bloc recognized the progress made by the Palestinian Authority on key reforms in exceptional circumstances. She also noted that the EU firmly believes that Palestinians must have a real and decisive role in shaping their own future, including governance across the West Bank, East Jerusalem and Gaza. These remarks came during the inaugural meeting of the Palestine Donor Group, a platform bringing together key international partners to support a reformed and well-functioning Palestinian Authority. The group was established as part of the EU's $1.6 billion multi-annual comprehensive program for Palestinian recovery and resilience and aims to coordinate financial support and monitor the implementation of the Palestinian Authority's reform agenda, with a focus on fiscal stability, governance, and economic recovery in the West Bank and Gaza. Let's listen to what Dubravka Sueka had to say.
Our financial support is linked to the Palestinian Authority reform agenda, which, of course, they committed to implement. We see these reforms as a prerequisite for a viable two-state solution, which is our ultimate goal. As said, our EU support is substantial, but we need further international support to stabilize the Palestinian fiscal situation. Our message was clear. Mr. Prime Minister, you are not alone in this endeavor. We recognize the progress achieved on key reforms under exceptional circumstances. We support your commitment to the reform agenda, in particular on fiscal, economic and governance reforms. The social protection and education reforms remain crucial. More work remains to be done in these areas. It is essential that we remain firmly committed to this path with determination and in full transparency.
Now, at least 3 people have died following a powerful earthquake in Bangladesh. The 5.7 magnitude quake struck at 10:38 a.m. local time near Narsindi, roughly 33 kilometers from the capital Dhaka, according to the U.S. Geological Survey reports. Authorities are assessing the damage and responding to affected communities. A wave of protests in support of the banned group Palestinian Action are underway in the cities and towns of UK. According to the UK police, 47 people were arrested in London outside the Justice Ministry, and they were charged and sentenced under the UK terrorism laws, as this could end them up in prison for up to 6 months. There were demonstrations across 20 towns and cities, with about 142 people being arrested out of 240 demonstrators. Earlier in June, more than 2,000 people have been arrested since Palestine Action was banned in July as a terrorist group, making it illegal to voice or show any support for them. And that's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more news and updates from around the world.